What if I told you that right now, someone in your family is slowly destroying your mental health, and you've been trained to call it love? Stick around because what you're about to discover will change everything. Have you ever wondered why the people closest to us sometimes inflict the deepest wounds? And why do we accept actions from relatives that we'd never tolerate from strangers or colleagues? It's uncomfortable to acknowledge, but some of our most profound emotional injuries don't originate from outsiders. They stem from the individuals sharing our dinner table, our bloodline, our history. And precisely because they're family, we talk ourselves into remaining silent, downplaying our suffering, and justifying patterns that deplete our vitality and compromise our personal limits. But here's the truth: keeping quiet never mends what someone continues to damage. Stoic philosophy provides us with an alternative perspective. While you cannot dictate how others behave, you absolutely can determine what you permit, how you react, and what level of access you grant to your emotional well-being. In this discussion, we'll examine 10 harmful patterns you should refuse to accept, regardless of family ties. Because defending your self-worth isn't an act of disrespect toward others, it's an expression of respect toward yourself. I encourage you to stay through the entire message. And if you're prepared to take back control of your emotional boundaries, leave a comment saying, "I choose peace." The first toxic pattern we need to address is emotional manipulation. This stands as one of the most destructive dynamics you'll ever encounter, particularly when the source is someone you care about deeply. When an individual weaponizes guilt, instills fear, or applies emotional pressure to control your actions, their relationship to you becomes irrelevant to the damage inflicted. Whether they're your parent, your brother, your sister, or your romantic partner, the consequences remain identical. They distort your statements, challenge your recollection of events, and force you to question what you clearly experienced and perceived. Gaslighting transforms from an isolated incident into a predictable cycle, not something that happened once by accident. Guilt becomes their go-to strategy, not a simple miscommunication between two people. And the silent treatment evolves into a calculated tool of punishment, not simply a period needed to calm down and reflect. As time passes, you begin questioning whether you're overly sensitive, excessively emotional, or unreasonably demanding, when the actual truth is that you're experiencing calculated emotional manipulation. Stoic philosophy provides you with an essential foundation to stand on. The truth doesn't need validation or approval from anyone else to exist. Your reality, your lived experiences, and your emotional understanding are inherently yours. Nobody possesses the right to revise your memories or dictate what your intentions were. Marcus Aurelius emphasized that you must remain firm in your own perception of events. And this confidence in your own experience is precisely what emotional manipulators attempt to undermine and steal from you. Your trust in what you know to be real becomes their target. The solution isn't engaging in more intense arguments, raising your voice to explain yourself, or endlessly attempting to prove your version of reality. It involves implementing a straightforward Stoic approach. First, pause the interaction. Second, present the objective facts. Third, refuse to engage in emotional negotiations or bargaining. When you introduce a pause, you interrupt their mechanism of control. When you rely on verifiable facts rather than emotional appeals, you eliminate the dramatic fuel they depend on. And when you decline to participate in emotional bargaining, rejecting the guilt, the pressure, the twisting of reality, you reclaim the personal power they've been systematically draining from you. Emotional manipulation functions only when you doubt your own judgment and perception. The instant you return to a place of clarity and self-trust, the entire unhealthy dynamic begins to collapse and lose its effectiveness. The second toxic pattern involves disrespecting boundaries. When someone repeatedly ignores or violates your clearly stated boundaries, what they're genuinely communicating is that your comfort level, your available time, and your personal autonomy hold less importance than their own convenience and desires. This conduct becomes particularly hurtful when family members are the perpetrators because the violation frequently disguises itself behind declarations of love, expressions of concern, or appeals to family tradition and expectations. They arrive at your home without any advance notice and fully expect you to reorganize your plans immediately. They interrogate your personal decisions as though they possess veto authority over how you live your life. They act entitled to claim your time, consume your energy, and influence your choices solely based on sharing genetic material or a family name. And when you finally gather the courage to communicate, "I need some space and distance," they respond with offense and hurt, treating your attempt to establish limits as though it were a direct personal attack against them. But establishing boundaries isn't an attack, it's an act of self-preservation and self-care. A person practicing Stoic principles views boundaries not as barriers designed to hurt others, but as fundamental expressions of personal dignity and self-worth. A boundary represents a tangible form of self-respect. It acknowledges the reality that your existence is not a public thoroughfare where people can wander through whenever they choose. Stoicism teaches us that your inner tranquility, your mental focus, and your core values remain within your sphere of control. And protecting these elements is not optional, it's a fundamental responsibility you owe to yourself. Marcus Aurelius taught his students that we must protect our mind with the same vigilance that a fortified city guards its entrance gates. You make the decision about who gains entry. You determine the duration of their stay, and you establish which behaviors will be permitted within your space. The most effective tool available here is remarkably simple: boundaries that require no extensive explanation or justification. You don't need lengthy defenses. You don't need to write emotional essays explaining yourself. You don't need to defend your choices against cross-examination. A clear, calmly delivered boundary statement is sufficient and complete. "I'm not available at that time. That arrangement doesn't work for me. I prefer not to discuss this particular topic." When you eliminate over-explanation from your boundary setting, you simultaneously stop negotiating and defending your inherent self-worth. People who genuinely respect you will make adjustments to accommodate your needs. People whose primary interest was maintaining control over you will resist and push back. And that resistance, that pushback, reveals everything you need to know about their true intentions. Boundaries don't drive away people who truly care about your well-being. They simply filter out those individuals who were never genuinely willing to honor you as a separate person with valid needs in the first place. The third toxic behavior is chronic criticism and belittling. Persistent criticism represents one of the most corrosive forms of toxicity precisely because it doesn't shatter you in one dramatic moment. Instead, it gradually wears down your sense of self over an extended period. And when this criticism originates from family members, it frequently conceals itself behind gentle-sounding disguises and seemingly caring phrases. "I'm just worried about your well-being. I'm only trying to help you succeed," or "I'm saying this for your own benefit and good." But the underlying tone is never genuinely supportive or encouraging. The recurring pattern is never truly constructive feedback. It's the identical negative message delivered repeatedly in slightly different packaging. "You're inadequate. You're handling things incorrectly. You should be more similar to this other person." Over an extended timeline, these small cuts accumulate to create deep psychological wounds. You begin doubting your capabilities, diminishing your achievements and accomplishments, and suppressing authentic parts of your personality to avoid criticism that was never intended to build you up from the beginning. A Stoic practitioner separates emotional reaction from objective evaluation of feedback. The crucial skill involves learning to distinguish genuine truth from poisonous negativity disguised as concern. Not every piece of feedback offered to you contains wisdom worth considering. Some of it represents projection of the critic's own issues, stems from their personal insecurity, or masks their hidden envy of your success. Marcus Aurelius stated that we must examine things objectively and clearly without allowing the judgments and opinions of others to transform into the judgments we adopt about our own character and worth. Toxic criticism isn't genuinely about facilitating your growth and development. It's about satisfying someone else's need to exert control or establish their superiority over you. The Stoic perspective liberates you from the trap of taking every critical comment personally by encouraging you to ask one simple but powerful question: is this feedback genuinely meant to help me improve, or is it fundamentally meant to hurt me and make me feel inadequate? The most effective response involves a subtle but powerful technique: label and name the behavior pattern itself, not the person delivering it. You don't need to launch attacks against them or defend yourself in endless circular arguments. You simply identify the harmful pattern with calm, clear language. This feels more like criticism than genuine support, or that specific comment wasn't helpful to me. When you label the behavior pattern clearly, you hold up a metaphorical mirror that reflects reality back without escalating the conflict or creating additional drama. People who genuinely care about your well-being will adjust their approach when made aware. People whose primary motivation is dominating and controlling others will become defensive, and their defensive reaction will reveal the information you need to know about their true motives. Chronic belittling and criticism thrive and flourish in an environment of silence. It ends at the precise moment you recognize the pattern, name it explicitly, and refuse to absorb it as objective truth about yourself. The fourth toxic behavior is emotional neglect. Emotional neglect stands as one of the most invisible and difficult to identify forms of harm because it doesn't arise from what someone actively does to you. It stems from what they consistently refuse to do for you. They don't truly listen when you speak. They don't acknowledge or validate your emotional experiences. They don't offer empathy, support, or genuine presence when you need it. And when you finally gather the courage to open up about your pain or struggles, they dismiss it with dismissive statements like, "You're overreacting to nothing. It's not a big deal at all," or "You're too sensitive about everything." Over an extended period, you stop sharing your inner world. You stop trusting others with your vulnerability. You begin believing that your emotions represent burdens other people shouldn't have to carry rather than valid signals deserving attention. Emotional neglect doesn't just create physical distance between people. It teaches you to silence and suppress parts of yourself just to maintain superficial peace in a relationship where your inner emotional world was never considered important or worthy of attention. Stoicism offers a grounding truth that can initially feel harsh, but it carries deep liberation within it. You cannot reasonably expect from others what they are fundamentally incapable of giving. Some individuals simply lack emotional awareness, emotional maturity, or emotional capacity regardless of how much you might wish otherwise. Their inability to validate your feelings and experiences says far more about their internal limitations and deficiencies than it says about your inherent worth as a person. Marcus Aurelius reminded his students that people act according to their inherent nature and capabilities, not according to our expectations and hopes for them. When someone proves emotionally unavailable to you, it's not your responsibility to drag empathy out of them or plead for understanding they don't possess the capacity to provide. It is your responsibility to recognize clearly what remains within your control and what exists outside of it. The appropriate response to emotional neglect isn't begging for more attention or demanding they care. It's strengthening and deepening the relationship you maintain with yourself. That process begins with implementing a self-validation ritual in your daily life. Instead of waiting for someone else to acknowledge your feelings and validate your experiences, you acknowledge them first yourself. Name what you're feeling clearly. Accept those feelings without harsh judgment. Remind yourself regularly that your emotions are valid and worthy of attention because they are real and you are experiencing them, not because someone else approves of them or grants permission for them to exist. When you validate your own inner world consistently, you stop depending on emotionally unavailable people for the emotional nourishment they cannot provide. Emotional neglect loses its devastating power at the precise moment you stop outsourcing your sense of worth to others. You become emotionally whole again. Not because other people finally showed up for you, but because you finally showed up consistently for yourself. The fifth toxic behavior involves envy and hidden competitiveness. Envy within a family structure is one of the most painful forms of toxicity because it feels like betrayal wrapped in a smile and disguised as normalcy. You achieve something meaningful and significant in your life, a career promotion, developing a new skill, a moment of genuine happiness and success. And instead of receiving pride or support from family, you're met with uncomfortable silence, sarcastic remarks, or subtle jabbing comments. They downplay and minimize your progress and accomplishments. They redirect the conversation away from your success. They search for a flaw or negative aspect to highlight and emphasize. Sometimes they even shift the attention back to themselves as if your success somehow threatens their position in the family hierarchy and pecking order. Hidden competitiveness manifests quietly and subtly. They copy your ideas without acknowledging or crediting you. They constantly compare themselves to you in unhealthy ways, or they feel visibly uneasy whenever you grow in directions they haven't. And slowly, without fully realizing what's happening, you start dimming your own light and downplaying your achievements just to avoid making someone else uncomfortable with your success. From the Stoic perspective and worldview, envy is never truly about you or your actions. It's a mirror reflecting the other person's internal insecurity and lack of groundedness. A person who is grounded in their own sense of purpose and path does not resent the growth and success of others around them. Marcus Aurelius taught that each of us has our own unique path to walk, our own natural pace of development, and our own specific role within the larger order of things. When someone feels threatened by your forward progress, it reveals the gaps, insecurities, and voids in their inner world and self-concept, not a defect or flaw in yours. Their negative reaction is a projection, an unconscious attempt to pull you back down to a level where they feel safe, equal in standing, or superior. Stoicism reminds you not to interpret this personally or take it to heart because someone else's insecurity is not your burden to carry or your problem to solve. The healthiest response is simple but remarkably powerful in its effects: detach yourself from their comparison game and competitive mindset. You don't need to defend your success or prove it was deserved. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone. You don't need to compete with someone who has transformed life into a scoreboard where they're constantly measuring and comparing. Instead, quietly refuse to participate in their game. Protect your goals and aspirations. Continue your personal growth trajectory, and surround yourself with people who celebrate your victories instead of resenting them or feeling diminished by them. Envious individuals lose their power and influence over you at the precise moment you stop playing their invisible comparison game. Your journey is uniquely yours, and no amount of hidden competitiveness from others can dim or diminish a life driven by authentic purpose rather than constant comparison. The sixth toxic behavior is constant blaming and zero accountability. There exists a special kind of exhaustion that comes from being blamed repeatedly for things you didn't do, didn't cause, and didn't choose to be part of. People who refuse to take accountability make you the emotional shock absorber for every mistake they make, every failure they experience, and every disappointment that occurs in their lives. If they lash out in anger, it's supposedly because you provoked them into it. If they fall short of a goal, it's supposedly because you didn't support them adequately. If something goes wrong in any situation, you should have known better and prevented it. Over time, you transform into the designated problem solver, the emotional caretaker, the walking apology machine, even in situations where you've done absolutely nothing wrong. This dynamic becomes especially painful within family structures because love gets weaponized as leverage against you. If you truly cared, you'd fix this for me. But what they're really communicating is, take responsibility for my life because I can't face myself or my own shortcomings. Stoicism cuts straight through this illusion with one liberating truth that changes everything. You control your own actions, not their stories and narratives about your actions. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that other people's judgments and interpretations belong to them, not to us. People who constantly blame others do so because it protects them from experiencing shame, from pursuing growth, and from engaging in honest self-reflection. Their refusal to be accountable is not a reflection of your performance or your character. It's a direct reflection of their emotional immaturity and inability to face themselves. And the moment you internalize and accept their blame as valid, you step out of your own lane and into a burden that does not legitimately belong to you. Stoicism teaches the opposite approach: stay in your own lane, hold your center firmly, and separate what is genuinely yours from what is not. The antidote is a calm and steady shift of responsibility back to its rightful owner. Shift responsibility back calmly and clearly, not with anger, not with defensiveness, but with simple clarity. You say things like, "That decision was yours to make." Or, "I can take responsibility for my part in this, but not for yours." When you stop absorbing blame that doesn't belong to you, you stop feeding and perpetuating the dysfunctional cycle. Their anger may spike initially because you're no longer accepting the role they assign to you in their narrative, but their reaction only proves the underlying truth. The problem was never your behavior or your inadequacy. It was their avoidance of personal responsibility. And the moment you anchor yourself firmly in clarity instead of guilt, you reclaim the emotional space and mental energy they've been occupying and consuming. Boundaries don't just protect you from toxic behavior patterns. They expose who is fundamentally unwilling to take responsibility for their own life and choices. The seventh toxic behavior is financial or emotional control. Financial and emotional control stands as one of the most dangerous forms of toxicity because it disguises itself cleverly as care, support, or sacrifice while quietly stripping away your independence and autonomy. Someone gives you money, then uses it as justification to dictate how you live your life. They offer help and assistance, then expect obedience and compliance in return. They remind you constantly of everything they've done for you, not out of genuine love, but as leverage and manipulation. And when you attempt to make your own independent choices, they respond with guilt trips, manipulation tactics, or emotional punishment. It doesn't matter whether they're a parent, a sibling, or a romantic partner. Control is control regardless of the relationship label. When love transforms into a transaction with strings attached, you stop feeling genuinely loved and start feeling owned like property. Stoic philosophy brings you back to the fundamental core of human freedom and dignity. Your inner autonomy is sacred and inviolable. Marcus Aurelius wrote that nothing has the power to imprison the mind unless the mind allows and permits it. That means even when someone holds financial power over you, emotional history with you, or a long list of favors they've done for you over your head, they cannot control your choices and decisions unless you surrender them. The Stoic lens reminds you that your dignity is not for sale at any price, and your life path is not a debt to be repaid according to someone else's terms. Real love does not require you to shrink yourself. Real support does not demand obedience as payment. Real family does not ask you to trade your independence for temporary peace. The most effective response to this kind of control is a simple three-step system you can implement. Document, decline, distance. You document the behavior not to fight them or prove them wrong, but to stay grounded in reality when they inevitably try to rewrite it. You decline the strings attached to their offerings. Thank you, but I can handle this myself, or I prefer to make my own decision on this matter. And if the control continues despite your boundaries, you create distance, whether emotional, financial, or physical, because proximity to a controlling person is what keeps the unhealthy cycle alive and functioning. The moment you stop playing by their rules and expectations, the power imbalance begins to crumble and dissolve. Control only works effectively when you comply with it. And the moment you reclaim your inner freedom and autonomy, their grip on you loses its strength and influence. Your life is yours alone, not a contract someone else gets to enforce according to their preferences. The eighth toxic behavior is breaking trust repeatedly. When someone breaks your trust over and over again in a recurring pattern, the wound isn't just the individual lie or betrayal. It's the cycle of betrayal and false reconciliation. They apologize, sometimes with tears streaming down their face. They promise earnestly they'll do better next time. They tell you they never meant to hurt you or cause you pain. And for a moment, you believe them because you desperately want the relationship to work and succeed. You want to believe in their potential and who they could become more than you trust your own accumulated experience with them. But then it happens again, and again, and again, the same harmful behaviors, the same tired excuses, the same temporary remorse that fades quickly. What changes over time is not them or their behavior patterns, it's your threshold for tolerating pain. You stop recognizing the clear difference between genuine forgiveness and self-abandonment. And slowly, gradually, you learn to tolerate and accept what you should have walked away from long ago. Stoic philosophy gives you a brutally clear lens to see through this fog. Patterns tell the truth, not words. People can say absolutely anything they want. Words are cheap and easy to produce. Promises are endless and cost nothing. Apologies flow freely without effort. But behavior is the real language of character and intention. Marcus Aurelius taught that you should judge actions and patterns, not declarations and promises. If someone's consistent pattern is inconsistency, betrayal, and disregard for your well-being, then that is who they are choosing to be in this moment, not who they could theoretically become, not who you wish they were, not who they claim they are trying to be. Stoicism frees you from clinging desperately to potential and brings you back to present reality. The reality you keep trying to explain away and rationalize. The correct response is simple and steady in application. Observe patterns consistently, not promises occasionally. You don't need to argue endlessly. You don't need to demand change from them. You don't need to beg for effort and commitment. You simply watch what they do consistently over time. And you make your decisions based on clear evidence, not on hope or potential. If their harmful behavior repeats in a pattern, your boundaries must tighten accordingly. If their trust-breaking continues unabated, your access to them must shrink proportionally. And if they refuse growth and change, you must choose peace over loyalty to pain and dysfunction. Some people use apologies as a reset button that erases consequences, not as a commitment to genuine change. The moment you stop letting promises blind you to observable patterns, you reclaim the clarity and the inner strength they've been relying on you to ignore and abandon. The ninth toxic behavior is using anger or outbursts as control. When someone uses anger as a weapon against you, the goal is never honest expression of emotion. It's domination and control. Rage attacks, loud intimidating outbursts, slamming doors violently, intimidation tactics, sudden emotional explosions that come from nowhere. These are not simply bad tempers or unfortunate personality traits. They are calculated strategies designed to make you shrink, submit, and stop questioning their behavior or decisions. And when it happens inside a family context, it becomes even more psychologically confusing. They'll say afterward, "I didn't mean it. I just exploded suddenly." Or, "You know how I am when I get upset." As if the violence and intensity of their reactions is somehow your responsibility to manage and accommodate. Over time, you learn to predict their anger, avoid their emotional triggers, walk carefully around them, and silence your own needs. Not out of genuine peace, but out of fear and conditioning. That is not love or family closeness. That is psychological conditioning and control. The Stoic perspective cuts through this dynamic with sharp clarity and precision. You are not responsible for another person's emotional storm or inability to regulate themselves. Marcus Aurelius taught that every human being is accountable for their own mind and their own emotional reactions to circumstances. When someone uses anger to control you, what you're witnessing is their inability to govern themselves effectively, not a failure on your part to be good enough. Their rage is not a reflection of your worth, your effort level, or your character. It is a direct reflection of their inner disorder and lack of self-mastery. And the more you internalize their outbursts as being about you, the more power you give them over your emotional life. The only effective response is grounded, firm, and deceptively simple in its execution. No engagement. Leave the scene immediately. You cannot reason with someone in the middle of a rage spiral or emotional storm. You cannot soothe them into self-control through your words. You cannot absorb their emotions until they cool down and become reasonable. Engagement feeds the fire and gives it oxygen. Silence starves it of fuel. Leaving removes the fuel completely from the equation. Whether it means stepping out of the room physically, ending a phone call immediately, or physically distancing yourself from their presence, the message is the same and clear. Your anger does not control me or my choices. When you refuse to participate in their volatility and emotional chaos, you reclaim your emotional space and expose the underlying truth. Their power only existed for as long as you stayed in the line of fire. Walking away is not weakness or surrender. It is mastery and self-control. And it is the first step to breaking a cycle that was never yours to maintain or fix in the first place. The 10th toxic behavior is playing the victim. Playing the victim is one of the most manipulative toxic behaviors because it flips reality completely upside down and turns your genuine pain into their dramatic performance. These individuals rewrite every situation so they become the wounded one deserving sympathy. No matter who actually caused the harm or initiated the problem, if you set a reasonable boundary, they claim you're being cruel and heartless. If you express your feelings and needs, they accuse you of attacking them unfairly. If you point out a pattern of behavior, they collapse into dramatic displays, tears, exaggeration, stories twisted and reshaped to make you feel guilty for simply protecting yourself. This is reverse responsibility in action. They hurt you, and somehow you end up apologizing to them. You learn to tiptoe around their reactions, to carry their emotional weight on your shoulders, and to keep peace by abandoning your own truth and experience. Over time, this dynamic erodes your confidence, your clarity of perception, and your ability to trust your own perspective and judgment. The Stoic lens gives you a powerful anchor to hold on to. Your peace, their narrative. You cannot control the story they tell about you to themselves or others. You cannot force them to see objective facts, acknowledge real impact, or take genuine accountability. What you can control is whether their narrative becomes your internal reality and self-concept. Marcus Aurelius taught that other people's perceptions are theirs to carry, not yours to manage. When a victim player twists the truth and rewrites history, they're not seeking understanding or resolution. They're seeking advantage and control. And the more you try to prove your innocence and defend yourself, the more power you give to their performance and drama. The antidote is quiet strength and firm boundaries. State limits once clearly. Then disengage. You calmly express your boundary clearly. I'm not responsible for your interpretation of events, or that's not accurate from my perspective. And then you step back deliberately. No debating endlessly. No over-explaining yourself. No emotional rescue missions to save them from their feelings. Disengagement removes you from their stage, forcing them to sit with their own story without an audience to perform for. Victim playing loses its grip and effectiveness the moment you stop playing the role they assigned you in their drama. And when you choose peace over their narrative, you reclaim the dignity and self-respect they've been trying to rewrite and erase. Now let's discuss the Stoic 4S protocol. If there is one truth that emerges clearly from all 10 toxic behaviors, it's this: patterns, not excuses, reveal who someone truly is at their core. People can cry convincingly, apologize profusely, blame stress and circumstances, promise change sincerely, or insist that you misunderstood them completely. But repeated behavior is the real teacher and truth-teller. The human mind wants desperately to believe words and promises, but the nervous system responds to patterns and consistency. And when the same behavior keeps showing up repeatedly, whether manipulation, avoidance, disrespect, blame, or volatility, that is no longer an accident or misunderstanding. It is a choice they are making. Awareness begins at the moment you stop believing excuses and start acknowledging patterns for what they genuinely are. But awareness alone isn't enough to protect you. It shows you the truth clearly, but it doesn't protect you from continued exposure to it. You've spent years being conditioned to minimize your pain, to soften your reactions, to explain away red flags, especially when they come from family members. That's why this transition is so critically important. Recognizing toxicity is step 1. Creating boundaries is step 2. And boundaries are where your strength, your clarity, and your self-respect finally take concrete shape. This is where the Stoic 4S protocol becomes your guide. A simple but powerful framework that helps you move from insight to action without being pulled back into guilt, fear, or emotional pressure from others. See it clearly. Stop romanticizing potential and who someone could theoretically be. Stop rewriting reality to be more palatable. Stop labeling hurtful actions as just their personality or how they are. Call the behavior what it genuinely is without softening it. Clarity is the first act of liberation and freedom. Stop and breathe deeply. Before reacting emotionally or impulsively, pause deliberately. That 2-second gap breaks emotional reflexes shaped and conditioned over years. It shifts you from survival mode into conscious choice. Anger, guilt, or panic cannot lead you where you need to go. Only a steady breath and calm mind can. Stay rational and grounded. Feelings are real and valid, but they aren't always accurate reflections of reality. Toxic people often rely on chaos or emotional pressure to keep you confused and off balance. Stay grounded in logic. Let logic, not guilt or fear, guide your next step forward. Ask yourself clearly, what is within my control right now in this moment? Safeguard your space and boundaries. This is where boundaries live and function. Limit access to your time and energy. Reduce emotional exposure to harmful people. Step back when needed without guilt. Decline conversations that go nowhere productive. Protect your peace the way you protect your physical safety, with firmness, clarity, and consistency. Awareness shows you the pattern clearly. The 4S protocol helps you step out of it effectively. Together, they allow you to reclaim your life, not through confrontation or dramatic scenes, but through clarity and self-respect. You've just uncovered 10 toxic behaviors you should never tolerate. Not even from family members. Manipulation, boundary violations, constant criticism, emotional neglect, hidden envy, financial control, blame shifting, repeatedly broken trust, anger used as a weapon, and victim playing all have one thing in common. They erode your inner peace and reshape how you see yourself and your worth. But awareness alone isn't the end of the journey toward healing. It's the beginning. Because once you can name the pattern clearly, you can finally break free from it. As you move forward from here, choose one specific situation in your life where a boundary is overdue. Apply the Stoic 4S protocol deliberately. See it clearly without denial. Stop and breathe before reacting. Stay rational despite emotional pressure. Safeguard your space consistently. Small acts of self-respect create powerful shifts in your emotional world over time. You don't need permission from anyone to protect your peace. You only need the courage to begin today. Thank you for spending this time with me today, for choosing clarity over denial and growth over comfort. If this message helped you reclaim even a piece of your strength and self-respect, please like this content, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you in the next discussion, stronger, wiser, and more grounded than before.